session, which is a very interesting fireside chat on protecting online payment from fraud. And moderating this session will be Mr. Rachit Chokera, Associate Director, Cybersecurity and Privacy, PwC India. Joining us as a part of our fireside chat speakers are Mr. Parthasarathy P, EVP, Chief Security Officer, First Abu Dhabi Bank. And may I also present to you Shalini Srivastava, EVP, Regional Head of Products and Solutions, TransUnion Sybil. Let us look forward to this session, all thanks to Mr. Rachit Chokera.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, good to be connected, and thanks for taking out time for this important discussion today, Mr. Parthasarathy and Mr. Shalini Srivastava. So quickly, just to introduce the panelists, we have Mr. Parthasarathy, who's the Chief Security Officer at First Abu Dhabi Bank and industry veteran with tons of experience on managing the security, not just on the payments, but overall ecosystem of how the financial services operate. And we have Mr. Shalini Srivastava, again, a seasoned professional, having worked across various launched different products, innovative business strategies. So we'll be hearing their views on how to protect the digital transactions from online crime and online fraud. So just to get started, I mean, in the last couple of years, we have seen the extent of usage of digital platforms, digital payments by consumers, backed by the support from the regulators as well. The push from regulators has been pretty supportive as well. And we've seen how companies have launched innovative products in terms of usage of digital payments. So that has ensured, a kind of an inclusive, usage of these transactions by the end consumers. And especially the push that you've been seeing lately from the regulator in terms of moving from a cash-based rich society to, if not a completely cashless, but at least a less cash, fraternity. And then also making the entire transparent, payment trail. That's also an agenda from the regulator. So quickly moving ahead to the first question, and that is to you, Mr. Parthasarathy. So we have seen, with the increasing trend of incidents that we see in the online digital identity theft, payment interception, ransomware attacks. So what, according to you, are the process and knowledge capabilities that can be used to prevent these kind of online frauds?
Hi, thanks for the invitation. I just want to put a disclaimer to say that the views of professional and personal, it doesn't attribute anything to the organization to which I am associated with. So with this, I will start across the question which has been posed across. See, today the payments, there is an evolution in the financial crime or even the cyber attacks are concerned. Earlier stages, the cyber attacks were more inclined by the people to show that they are knowledgeable, they are ahead of the formal structure, and they used to do the denial of service attacks or defacement of the sites, and it were more driven by certain principles or a type of a social activisms were there. But now, over a period of time, if you see across after 2012 Bank Muscat attack, where the card processing system was compromised, around $45 million was wiped out of one of the banks in GCC. Today, there is a targeted attack towards the financial industry, for extra financial industry or any industry which is associated itself with an online payment for extraction of money. So this is now the focus, and they're trying to find out multiple ways of doing it across, starting from a business mail takeover or or a OTP takeover or any type of an identity theft by which they could do across the financial transactions. And it becomes a little bit more complicated when the issuing bank or the POS bank is in two different countries and the transaction happens in the third country. It becomes borderless and it becomes extremely difficult for anybody to work on it. Even the regulators do not have a hold over it because it goes into multiple jurisdictions and multiple regulatory regimes. So if you ask across, the payments requires to be risk categorized. The payment processing companies have to bring in a risk-based analysis of transactions on the basis of the customer, the pattern of usage, the locations of usage, the type of expenditure, and have a risk-based approach to total payment solution rather than having a threshold-based solution. When you say threshold-based solution, I have come across in multiple economic space that when you don't have an OTP for a certain amount and below, people do multiple transactions at the below value before the customer could find out there's a huge amount of money has been swiped out of the customer's account. So the velocity, the speed, the pattern of expenditure, so those things require to be put across. And also step up authentication and step up things has to happen. For example, I just don't want to mention about a bank. There's a bank in India which says that if you're doing a high value transaction, you require to digitally sign the transaction rather than authenticate the transaction. The reason being across is, even in India, transactions as such requires to be digitally signed as per the IT Act of 2000 and subsequently modified. So a step up authentication, step up security controls is the thing that will help the payment industry to mature further.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Parthasarathy, for your views, and I think quite relevant. Especially the one which you mentioned about doing the risk-based, categorization and analysis for the type of customer and the basis that you kind of define the risk profiling for that set of individuals. Coming to you, Mr. Shaleen. So, of the all the trends that you must have seen in terms of the online risk, the online frauds, what do you think are the top trends or the risks, which are affecting both the consumers and the companies, as we expand our, footprint online?
So, Rachit, I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm
Very
having
clearly,
some technical
yes.
difficulties. This is great. I'm on my phone, so I apologize to everybody if I seem a little distorted. I promise you I'm devastatingly handsome otherwise, right? So if there's any issue in the middle, do please not let me know, Rachit. So firstly, thank you for letting me participate in this particular chat. It's a very interesting and near and dear topic for me. And I was just listening to the previous conversation where the gentleman was actually talking about the size and expanse of our market. So yeah, we are growing at an amazing pace. I think November of this year was like 4 billion UPI transactions, double of what it was last year. So, with growth obviously brings more and more opportunities for fraudsters to kind of play mischief. So from a consumer point of view, right, what we're noticing and seeing is the consumer, the intent of the fraudsters obviously remains the same. They want to get access to your financial instruments. The methods that they use are getting more and more sophisticated and advancing with the technology, right? So one way of getting your payment instrument is technology or philosophy or skimming, right? So the old traditional ways of where you go to a restaurant and they skim your card and they copy all the details. Well, now that has transcended online. Give you an example. This is a very recent example of Q4 itself, where basically there was a attack on a web page of an international airline. Users' booked tickets were redirected to an unauthorized server, and the payment and information details were actually collected. This breach went on for several months actually before they were even found out. So I think almost 500,000 records were stolen, right? So this is happening extremely predominantly. I mean, recently on the dark web, there's a new portal being launched by fraudsters, and to promote their portal, they branded this thing called unprecedented generosity, and they gave away 1 million credit card details away for free. And again, this is Q4 of this year itself. Now, phishing remains obviously one of the most dominant methods, where as far as our country is concerned, and unfortunately targets mostly the people who are uneducated and the elderly in our country, right? Where people call up and say, we want to help you process a payment or a refund, right? Obviously, you have the methodology where the OTP based, you can actually send money and receive money as well. So, they'll call up, they'll take your UPI details, they'll send a fake OTP, you'll get money in your account, and you're thinking, oh, I gave the OTP on the phone and, I got money in. So next OTP, which is to take money out of your account, you gladly give or enter, and, boom, money's gone. What's really scary, what we've seen in recent trends is, with all these smartphones, right? Basically, if you, fraudster will send you an SMS, right? So they'll call you, they'll say, we're from your wallet company, we want to update your KYC. They'll make you open the app, they'll send an SMS. And until recently, a link in an SMS was actually always active, even when you actually receive the SMS, don't even have to open it. So I think that's changed a bit now. But if you click on the link, or erstwhile, if the SMS comes to you, all of a sudden using that link, the fraudster takes control of your phone. And now they've got control of your open, already logged in wallet app. Now, if your wallet is connected directly to your bank, next thing they're transferring money from your bank account into your wallet when they have control of your phone. So they're controlling OTPs and transferring out to different accounts. And once again, money is gone, right? Now, from a corporate side of things, right, where we see most of the frauds or the impacts is really about onboarding or where accounts are open, right? Even when a P2P player or a merchant registering on a payment gateway, right, on an e-commerce platform, they are fake identities, fake companies. There are fake food providers being established and registered on food delivery portals, right? They collect orders for a day or two, and then they vanish in thin air because they never really existed, right? So we're facing as an industry monumental issues in how money jumps from one account to another until it's extracted in a physical location, and sometimes they actually transfer out of the country using cryptocurrency. So a lot of the regulations that you're seeing around crypto for a reason. It's also to protect us as a society. So yeah, these are kind of the trends we're looking at these days.
Yeah. Right, Charlene, thank you for that. So, and that actually makes me, wonder and, ask Mr. Parthasarathy the next question, which is on, if these frauds are happening, there's one aspect which Charlene mentioned of, people not being aware, they'll click on a link if they get a link on through an SMS or an email. So there is one human aspect, in terms of awareness. But then there's one important aspect, which is in terms of technology. So over the next maybe few years, what do you think is that technology or related areas to technology that we can kind of put in place to prevent ourselves from, the online frauds?
See, today, if you look across, we are going digital, and we are going digital without actually digitizing the identities. See, that is where the great gap is there, and that gap is being exploited by the fraudsters. The second thing is most of our transactions today are on the base of authentication rather than digital signatures. I feel the more and more countries are pushing towards national identity, and national identities are getting linked to digital identities, and the digital identities help you to handle the payments, not only payments, any type of a commerce transactions, whether you want to sign a bank guarantee digitally or you want to sign a rental agreement digitally. So those things are the things which will evolve, and technologies like TPM modules in mobile phones and computers, which can store the public key, the public key private key combination in a secured manner without getting them exposed to the operating system, so that the operating system's exposure does not compromise your digital identity. So digital identity is something which will evolve. It will become a big business in my perception. Because I'll call this as digital identity assurance services. Because and also, if you look at the IT Act 2000, authentication-based transfers can be questioned by any bank account holder to the court, and the court will hold that evidence as untenable as every transaction request be digitally signed. I don't know how many people look into it in the legal aspect of it. You can very well say your administrator inserted this row and I didn't do this transaction, and hence I am not responsible for it. Please return the money. Please prove me that whether this particular transaction evidence provided the bank is tenable in the court of law as a digital evidence. All the transaction logs which you provide will not be held as an evidence because it is not digitally signed. So in my perception, if you look at today, that's the reason banks are pushing the digital signature for corporate high value payments as a compulsory mode, and they try to slowly push it to the retail segment. So if you ask me, digital identities, and the third aspect which I just want to talk about is the concept of the banking systems are not immutable or like the blockchain technologies. So what does it mean? The transactions can be technically changed by administrator or a wrongdoer who has an admin rights. So the banking system, for example, just I want to quote this because it's very interesting, which has come up in the UK regulator. UK regulator has asked its bank to prepare themselves for a next year cyber war game where the integrity of their systems will be compromised. Think of a chaos which can happen if one of the banking terminal is compromised, users terminal is compromised, and system is just posting random transactions, and what chaos it can create across. So the integrity of the banking system is something which will be in my perception, the greatest security concern in the years to come.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parthasarathy. And again, a very interesting point. And you talk about the identity, and how the national identity would be linked to the identity for doing the transactions. And we go no far than looking at something like an Aadhaar-based, Aadhaar-enabled transactions as well, which happen currently. So Mr. Shalin, so what is it from a government or regulator's standpoint? What do you think are some of the areas that should be brought in, which will kind of increase the confidence in the customers to adopt first the digital payments, and they get the confidence that I can do it more securely as well. So what are some of the areas that you think should be brought in from those point of view?
That's a really interesting area point. In fact, actually, the government are actually doing a lot, right, on this topic already, right? Every day you're seeing new regulations. You're seeing more regulations of free flow of data, right, for basically being able to receive services, especially around financial services. And then you're seeing a whole lot of regulations around making sure that we protect that data, right? So, for example, if I'm collecting your phone number and email ID to sell you food items, I mean, I can't just go and blatantly sell that data off for somebody to give you a credit card or a home loan, right? So that's quite a lot is being done, but what's not being done enough is basically promoting the sharing of data across industries, especially in negative scenarios, right? So give you a simple example today, the RBI obviously has all fraud data reported by banks. The NCRB, which is the National Crime Registry, basically has all financial fraud data. They might be intersect in the back channels between these two databases. But now if you look at, say, from a perspective of somebody using the same credentials to commit a fraud on insurance, is there an intersect across all three, right? It's basically not made available amongst even regulated entities. And now because there's so many private entities engaging in the e-commerce play, especially the wallets play, they have no access to this particular data, right? So yeah, digital fraud now can see a point of entry from many sources. It's even e-commerce companies, right? Just simply think like a Flipkart or an Amazon, right? They have, I guess, these sort of companies have a full-fledged responsibility while onboarding a merchant, right? There might be no penalties on the e-commerce if there's a fraud there. I'm not exactly sure on that regulation, but if they need to protect their customers, because if there are more fraudulent transactions on their websites, they're going to lose the single most valuable thing they have, which is their customer, right? See, the government needs to facilitate a world where negative data sharing needs to be perpetrated across industries and needs to be made across the board, right? Ensuring protection of the data. Some private entities, like obviously, we're a regulated entity ourselves, our peers, we do have databases on negative behavior frauds, but it's again in an isolated area, which is banking and insurance, right? Now, the Ministry of Home Affairs, for example, has lakhs of phone numbers which get reported on a regular basis. People complaining, I got frauded by this number, this UPI and all. But we need to kind of create a single repository, a place where we can actually access all of this, right? The MHA is trying to bring together agencies in the financial ecosystem to kind of create something, at least sharing of data, creating a centralized fraud repository or risk repository, right? So that's a great initiative they've taken, but obviously it's far and few between what we need. I mean, today a phone number which might simply be used to taking, for fun, order of, or taking somebody's account on Swiggy and ordering some food for a party. I mean, that same phone number, the perpetrator can actually next day be hacking into a bank account. So yeah, this is extremely, extremely important point that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah, very, very valid point, Shalin. Thanks for that. And I think to that, I think there's an important question which generally, get asked by all the consumers, who are using these digital payments. What is it that I need to do to protect myself? So if you could just provide a very basic advice, Mr. Parthasarathy and Shalin, to consumers, what will that one advice be to the consumers?
See, to start across, the first and foremost thing is keep your personal life as personal life, and your personal life is personal data. And if your personal data is available in social media, you are just inviting yourself to be defrauded very easily. Either you will be defrauded or people around you can be very easily defrauded. So the most important thing is people have to become conscious about the data, what they are sharing. and that is the starting point which they must do minimum. The second thing which they have to do across is today the banks are becoming more and more proactive. They provide facilities to block your card when you're going on a long vacation or non-reachable, or you can block your biometric in Aadhaar when you don't require it. So the even the end users and the consumers must think on the concept of need to know basis and minimum privileges. And these are all fundas which is used in the security field. But I would say they have to practice this in a limited fashion in their life to ensure that they are not their identities or their privileges are not getting hijacked because of cyber fraudsters. The last but not the least is you must have the alerts enabled and you must monitor your accounts. And when an alert comes across, not to dismiss the alerts, but just go through the alert to say that, is this the alert which is coming for my account, is my, family accounts, what are the details of it? Last but not the least, ensure that you use devices which have legal softwares periodically patched, periodically provided with all securities which is provided by the vendor, and ensure that the device from where the person is using it is reliable and it is not carrying any type of a malware, virus, ransomware, whatever word you want to put across, a malicious code which intention is to track and take the identities and the authentication data for defrauding you. So this is the minimum which the I feel a user can do to protect themselves. Shalin, your views.
Yeah,
Shalin.
no, I think you covered it very well, sir. And I'll kind of piggyback on some of those things, and especially the social media piece, right? I mean, hey, I've got a Facebook account which might be public. I'll have my mother on there. So you got my mother's maiden name. Everyone's wishing me happy birthday on my birthday. I go to LinkedIn. You can back calculate basically by which year I was basically born, right? I've got an Instagram account for my dog, so you know who's my pet, those secret questions and stuff like that. So yeah, you have to really secure yourself. You're responsible for your own security. I mean, if somebody hacks, you download a malicious software on your phone that hacks into your bank account, the bank is not liable. You are, because you perpetrated that action, right? So bank is not going to be able to take responsibility for that. You really need to protect yourself on that aspect of things, right? I think just to add on to what Mr. Parthasarathi already spoke about, right? The only thing is about educating yourself, also about the financial instruments that you use, right? What you have, whether that's UPI, whether it's a credit card, right? Understanding how your interests are protected. Like some of the credit cards might not have fraud protection, right? So you have to make sure that you're aware, especially when traveling internationally, where two-factor authentication might not be into play and things like that, right? So yeah, you have to spend time to understand the financial instruments you use, what they mean, how they protect you, how are you exposed, and also what Mr. Pathi mentioned about continuously checking your credit health, right? Check your bank statements, check your credit reports, right? And if you have loved ones who are elderly, please do that on a regular basis. You'd be surprised. There are like 20 inquiries, and all of a sudden you see the 21st. Where did this inquiry come from? I never applied for bank XYZ loan, right? I was never there on this date. So the simplest of things can trigger off a action which can help protect you, because most fraudsters these days, they don't just immediately get your details and try to hack in. They take time, they cultivate, they build on it, they steal your identity, they create different identities based on your identity. So pay attention to every little detail and be really aware and educate yourself and those around you.
One more thing which I want to add to what Shalin said. For example, today you must be very careful. Account takeovers and creating accounts in the name of others is another name of the game, which is the side effects of digital. Today, if somebody downloads a KYC in a bank account where you have not opened the account, the CKYC registrar sends you a message saying that your KYC has been downloaded to open an account. Now, that's a very big risk, because think of a situation that you didn't open your name in an account, but somebody else has opened it and you don't know what he is going to use that for. So I personally believe every alerts coming from the centralized registrar or your banking or a card company must be seen very carefully. And if there is anything to the contrary, you must press an SOS. It can be even a false SOS. It's better you call up and make the noise with the bank or the institution immediately, rather than you lose the money and then go. See, once you lose the money is gone. The prosecution rate in cyber crime is 0.0001%. Cross country,
Absolutely.
it is impossible. So the question is, prevention is better than cure. Internet provides you a huge amount of flexibility, but that also brings you a huge amount of risk. And people must understand that it is like a petrol. The petrol must be in the car and it must drive, rather than it be outside, it can create a fire. So it is the same which you are using across. So the people who are using the internet must have their own accountability or a responsibility towards the tool which they are using, which is providing them so much convenience. Thanks.
Absolutely. Well
Yeah.
said, Mr. Parthasarathy.
Yeah, well put, Mr. Parthasarathy. And I think very rightly put by Parthasarathy, you and Charlene as well. So while the institutions, the regulators are there to put the processes and the right technologies in place, it's also consumers' responsibility to be aware and act responsibly. And that's where we can all work together towards making the digital payments and online transactions more secure. Thank you so much, Charlene and Mr. Parthasarathy, for your views and for this fireside chat. We just have a quick question from the audience, and I'll read it out, and I'll leave it to you, both of you who wants to answer this. So the
Shaleen,
question
you can
is,
answer it across. You've spoken about tokenization. Please go ahead.
so the question is how tokenization will help online payment frauds, and what will be the data shared between issuer and acquirer once tokenization is implemented. So basically, the question is how will tokenization help in the online, prevent online payment fraud?
Sure. So basically, today, if you look at it, right, the credit card details that you share are actually stored unencrypted in certain areas. So I've actually seen that, right? When you transfer from let's say a payment gateway to the bank website, the data is transferred across, right? So there's obviously PCI standards and things like that, but a lot of the time, this data at one point or the other is actually left exposed naked, and that gets pulled out. That can be actually utilized somewhere else for fraud. So that's a huge risk, right? Especially when you're sitting at a Wi-Fi, using a public Wi-Fi. That transference of data can actually be, misused by a lot of fraudsters. So in that context, right, the limited knowledge do I have on the tokenization piece of it, right, is to ensure that it's not the naked credit card that's actually being transferred across entities. So similar to when you looked at, over the past couple of years, when Aadhaar looked at creating a virtual Aadhaar number, right? It's the same principle as that. So when you're sharing, you're not sharing the actual credit card number. What you're sharing is a one-time tokenized format, which is recognizable with the endpoint, which says, hey, I know this has come from Charlene. I know this is the right credit card number when I decrypt it by my secure keys. Hence, I can process the payment. But if somebody actually copies that and tries to resend it, it won't work. So that's how, in principle, that's how it's going to work.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Charlene. So with that, we'll wrap up this chat. And once again, thank you so much, Charlene and Mr. Parthasarathy, for taking out your time and presenting your views. I think the audience will be, really well aware of, how they kind of can protect themselves from, the frauds of online payments. So thank you once again. Over to you, Isha.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.